Well, it's true. I am ending the Transaction Care podcast. So I guess I have some questions to answer, or maybe some people are celebrating, maybe some people are sad. But either way, you will get all of your answers today in this episode. So please stick around to the very end so you know exactly what's happening, when, why, what, how, all that good stuff inside and out. So stay tuned. And in the meantime, please visit my website, transactioncare.com. A couple things. Please sign up for my newsletter. Just submit your name and email. Boom, you're in. Second, please check out my TC community Patreon page where you can learn to TC. You can get one-on-one coaching with me. You can join my awesome community where you get exclusive content from myself. That does include how I run my business on a day-to-day, checklists, digital products, et cetera, et cetera. It's a good time over there. Check it out. It's all under my website, transactioncare.com. So, with all of that said, let's jump straight into today's episode. So, why am I ending the Transaction Care podcast? Well, if you are a regular listener, you may have noticed some inconsistencies this year with my posting schedule, with a lack of interviews, and I had to really dig deep and ask myself why. Why am I doing this? And does that why, is it still relevant to who I am today? And I will say the episodes that I did release this year have been honestly a behind the scenes look into where my head's been, where my life has been, where the work I've been doing on myself, putting that on display for you all to kind of go through it with me. I'm learning and growing as I go, and I just happen to be recording it and documenting it in real time and sharing it with a bigger audience versus just working with it on my own or with a therapist, a coach, or family and friends. So I have been grappling with this thought for honestly months, maybe even since I started the podcast. Initially, my goal was to create a space for one, myself, selfishly, to be able to create content from my perspective as a TC. Up until that point, I had been a TC for close to 20 years, and I felt a pulling towards educating more people and giving them a place of reference and guidance in their journeys to become either realtors, agents, transaction coordinators, whatever the case may be. I wanted to shine more light, especially on transaction coordinators, because we weren't getting that at the time. And I just remembered as I was quitting my job and working my 9 to 5, I didn't have many references. I didn't have much information on the internet for me to pull, for me to reference and gather in order to prepare to, on how to run a business as a transaction coordinator, how to transition from a 9 to 5 into self-employment, into entrepreneurship. And I realized, okay, if I'm on the internet all the time and I can't find this information, rather than waiting for someone to create it, I'm going to create it. And that's pretty much what started the idea of having a podcast. And at first, I was documenting everything on YouTube from my perspective. So I had the visual aspect. And I realized, you know what? Podcasts are starting to get more popular. Let me add my 2 cents to the audio space. So then I turned the Transaction Care brand into a podcast. And I somewhat neglected the visual aspect of things and just focused on audio and in ways to teach you all how to become transaction coordinators, how to thrive in the real estate business, expose you guys to different career paths within the real estate industry, which is something I still want to do because I think real estate can be very lucrative, but you also should pick a career path that is suitable and in alignment with who you are as a person and your skills and your personality. But with all of that said, I realized that when I was creating the show, I kind of had a vision. Well, not kind of. I had a vision. And I was like, it's going to be a podcast. I got to do this and it's going to happen. But at the time, I had so many things going on that I never got it going. So now it's the end of the year, it's getting close to the holidays, and I still hadn't produced the show. So I spent a lot of time leading up to December gathering my podcast and putting it all together and pretty much laying out each step of how I want this show to be, who I want to interview, what topics I want to talk about. And it was amazing. I felt this natural high of creativity. I felt like I was in my zone of genius, and I finally felt like I found my place in real estate that was beyond just transaction coordination. Because I should also mention that, during the pandemic, I think we all were questioning the future. What does that look like in terms of career? For those that were 9 to 5ers and wanting to get into something more flexible, more remote. And I felt like if people were going to come into transaction coordination, I'd want them to do it correctly or to do it right, or at least have all of the information necessary, because for me, I was starting to enter a place mentally, emotionally, even physically. Feel like my body was rejecting the work. And I didn't want to be a TC anymore. I was done. But it was the only thing that was paying me at the time. So I knew I couldn't give it up all the way yet. But I knew if I worked hard enough on the creative end, it would eventually pay off and become something lucrative in the future. So I put out the show, I started it, and it was great. Honestly, right out the gate, I dropped 3 episodes, an intro, and I had my schedule on lock to drop a new episode every Monday. And I did just that for 50 whole weeks straight. There are 52 weeks in a year. I took 2 weeks off. One was for Labor Day, and the other one was, honestly, I don't even remember why I took a break, but I released 50 episodes back to 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 back. And it burned me out. This is something I have, you know, learned in my experience with therapy was getting comfortable with the gray areas and not rushing to get to the finish line just because I had a great idea or because something is working. It's okay to stop and pause and reevaluate your ideas and to even celebrate your ideas and your wins and make space and time for gratitude and grace and time off. I think I thought putting out a podcast was going to be the end all be all. Like overnight, I was going to be an overnight success. No one else is doing this. It's going to make me 6 figures. It's going to do all this, all that. But something was pulling at me towards maybe around week 40, I would say, maybe even sooner. I can't even, it happened so quick putting out 50 episodes, within that first year and doing interviews and solo episodes. It took a lot out of me. And I also sacrificed a lot of my business in order to focus on the podcast. So along the way, I realized, okay, this isn't quite how I imagined it. I don't have any brand deals. The downloads are decent, but they feel pretty low, considering the topic and the subject matter that I'm discussing on the show and the people I'm interviewing. And then I started thinking about my marketing and the budget and then time. But I was like, you know what? We just got to knock out these episodes. We got to knock out these episodes. So I kind of had my blinders up for a long time. And then I hit episode 50. I hit my 1 year anniversary. And all of a sudden, I just unraveled. I took the deepest exhale, the longest exhale that I needed after 50 straight episodes. And I was just kind of like, I think I'm done. I think I'm done. I don't feel connected to the show. I feel like I lost sight of my vision, my why, my desired outcome for the show. And I'm also not really yielding the results that I had envisioned for myself in terms of data and information and statistics, right? So, what did that mean for the show leading into my second year, which was me this year in 2024? At the time of this recording, it is September 2024. But in reference to January 2024, I don't think I put out a solid episode until maybe February. And then I might have skipped a couple of weeks and then dropped another one in March. I don't even think I dropped one in April. You get the idea. And if you've been following along every week, you probably have noticed an inconsistency, in trying to find time to be as dedicated to the show. I knew something was wrong. I knew there was something that I didn't like about the show that I had to fix ASAP. And it came down to I either stop doing this completely and end the show. I go back to my roots of YouTube and just start recording vlogs, get that out of my system and see how I could incorporate both audio and visual, but also kind of document my journey along the way without making the show all about me. Or, or here we go. Here's the good stuff. I rebrand. And if you're still listening up until this point, that is where I have landed. As of September 2024, after going back and forth about this question for months on end, overthinking everything, over analyzing everything, being paralyzed in my own anxieties, insecurities, doubts, I have landed on rebranding. So, what does that look like moving forward? It means I'm changing the name of the show. Yeah, you heard it here first, exclusive. Brr, 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 brr. I am officially changing the name of the show from the Transaction Care Podcast to also, this is being recorded visually. So there is a video and it will be on my YouTube channel. But we are officially changing the name of the Transaction Care Podcast to
Three, two,
The Keys.
one.
Yes. Giving myself a round of applause on that. The Keys is the official name of my podcast. And let me break down how I got to this point. So, and I'm going to do my best to keep this as short as possible because I do want to continue to touch on this matter, but really just give you guys a quick understanding of what was going on in my head. And I feel like I kind of got you guys through that in this episode. As you can see, I'm an overthinker, over analyzer, but I'm working on that. But I'm also a creative, I'm an artist, and I'm sensitive about my ish. So, why the keys? And right out the gate, honestly, I just felt restricted in my own name. Believe it or not. I had I've used Transaction Care as my brand on social media to market my TC business, to market my content. But it didn't really feel like it was resonating with the show. And I always knew the show would be its own entity, its own thing. But because I was rushing to get something out initially when I first started the show, to have a podcast, just to say I had a podcast, to also put out the ideas that I had quickly rather than risking putting out a whole new show I felt like let me just use Transaction Care because people are already aware of that brand and my name associated with that. So let me just go with it and see how I feel. And if I want to change it in the future, I will, but it will have to be sooner than later. So in the beginning of the show, Transaction Care, it worked. I loved it. I mean, I still love it. It's still, adding care back into the real estate business is still a huge part of me. But when it comes to having a podcast, I did feel restricted in my own name. I also wanted something easier to say. I'm not even going to joke. That's not even a joke. Transaction Care is a handful, so I figured not only do I want something easier for myself to say, but I want something easier for my guests to say, something that's a lot easier to market. As a content creator, we want to make things as simple and easy to grasp and stand out as possible. And truly, the name was just too long. And I didn't feel connected to it. I didn't feel free anymore when I was creating under that name. And having a whole new show with something simple to the point just felt better. And I was going back and forth about this for months, like I said, but it wasn't until this past weekend when I was driving around the city, doing my regular, going to workout class, hanging out with friends, when I randomly started thinking about my podcast. And I never think about work, not never, but I barely think about work or the show on the weekends. I try to give myself at least the weekends to turn my brain off, to be off the clock per se. And I remember talking to my Lyft driver and randomly thought about my podcast. And I was, looking down at my phone, talking to him, looking out the window, and something told me to look up. And again, mind you, I'm thinking about my podcast at this moment. And I look up and I'm passing by a street named Key. And I was like, okay, God, I hear you. I see you. It's on. So that was honestly the deciding factor that led me to this point, to this moment with the show. I'm renaming it. So the Transaction Care podcast is officially done, and we are making room for the keys, the keys, the keys, the keys, the keys. And the reason I keep calling it a show because I do feel like it is more than just a podcast, but of course it is still going to be audio. I'm introducing the visual aspect as well. So I'm kind of starting that right now by just pressing record and releasing the audio on Mondays, and the visual will probably be on Wednesdays. So just visit transactioncare.com to get access to everything. Sign up for newsletters so you know exactly when new episodes drop. Interviews will be back, but in terms of content, in terms of subject matter, I also felt like only talking about real estate and transaction coordination was also holding me back. Almost felt pigeonholed in my own creativity by only interviewing certain people in certain careers. And do I have any regrets? No, absolutely not. Like I had to go through that to understand where I needed to be today. But it was actually my episode 50 with my interview with David Breckheimer that I realized like this is more than just real estate. And sitting on that thought for months, I was like, but what does that look like? So I want you guys to also realize ideas, creativity, dreams, goals, some may happen overnight, but most will require hard work, effort, experimenting, failure, more failure than wins, than success. But if you're clear on your vision, if you're clear and your intuition is screaming at you, I just say, I just recommend try not to dwell too much on the idea, but do your best to take action quicker than you wouldn't. So before I start rambling on and on and on, the keys is officially here. And I will be releasing more episodes under this new name starting September 30th, which is around the corner. So thank you guys for listening thus far. 60 plus episodes under the name Transaction Care. And I felt like, you know what? Before we hit that 100 episode milestone and before we hit 5,000 downloads and increase viewership, listenership, and community, which is most important to me, is building community and helping you all in your real estate journey and your business journey, and even in your mindset journey. That's an area I want to touch and tap into more, is the inner workings of our minds and how that impacts our day to day. Going back to the roots of adding the care back into each transaction. It's beyond the desk, it's beyond the transactions, it's beyond the credentials. Beyond that, it comes down to who we are, how we're healing, how we are navigating life, how we are encouraging and uplifting ourselves and others. So be on the lookout for all of that. I hope for those that have made it this far in the video that I have somewhat impacted or inspired and motivated you. And I hope you continue to keep listening. Please tell a friend, tell a friend, tell a friend. Repost this on your social media and tag me. I don't know if I'm going to create separate social media for the show yet. I'm still gathering all of that information. I'm still putting it all, a, a mini rollout. I'm still putting that together, but just know we have a brand new name of the podcast, of the show, the Transaction Care Podcast, formerly known, oh, I'm sorry, rewind, flip it and reverse it. The Keys, formerly known as the Transaction Care Podcast, is now live. Artwork coming soon. More interviews, more guests, more solo episodes coming soon. Please subscribe, please follow, and also 5-star rating goes a long way, even 1 star. And reviews also help to push the show out to a wider audience, to reach my target audience, and to build more community. So thank you guys again for listening. Stay tuned. I don't even think I gave an intro in the beginning. I just jumped straight into it. But my name is Lillian Hernandez, aka Lily, and this is The Keys. Stay tuned, more episodes. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.